The thing about Main Street or downtown is that nobody ever thinks about production businesses. Well, other than me. Right? We have Main Street. People think about restaurants or some retail. Maybe there's office space upstairs. If you're lucky, you might start getting some residential downtown, some apartments. That's exactly what you guys need. Nobody ever thinks about what else we can do to diversify. What other kinds of businesses can we bring in that help diversify the types of businesses in our downtown, in our Main Street? And small-scale manufacturing is one of those businesses that can either be in a storefront space or in a back-of-alley space, but bring more jobs and more energy to a downtown and to a Main Street. So I'm going to talk about Main Street for just a couple minutes. You're going to have to bear with me because I'm going to talk through some of the details in these pictures that I really want you to think about, because for Main Street and for a downtown to work, it's not just about the businesses, but it's about what it looks like between the businesses and the streets and the sidewalks. So there's 4 principles of Main Street, and this is true of downtowns in general, of a small downtown in general. One is organize. That means organize the building owners, the property owners, the businesses in the downtown. They should be able to talk to each other and have common goals. What do we want out of our downtown? What kind of services do we need? How do we promote ourselves as a community of businesses in a downtown? And that's what a Main Street program does. But if you look at the picture, beyond organizing the businesses, you see very organized space, right? We see a coherent line of buildings. We see this open sidewalk with street trees and lights, light poles, and then we see on-street parking. And all of that layering of the space is actually very important for a downtown and a Main Street, because the people need to feel welcome to walk along the sidewalk, and a wide sidewalk is key to that. They also need to feel safe. And so having the trees and the light poles and the on-street parking between them and the cars is the key combination that makes people feel safe on a Main Street. And so we need to think about how we organize that space too. The second is to promote. And I actually think there's a fair amount of this going on. That's about events and programming, right? And how to make the place active and inviting. And you can see the people along the side walking through this space, and you can see, if you look at it carefully, you can actually see the parking meters are along the left-hand side. So this is obviously a street that they've closed off for an event where the people feel comfortable enough walking through it. But it's that same thing where you have the light poles and the street meters protecting the people who can walk on the sidewalk when the street isn't closed. And then there's the design. And so this is the design about all of the different parts of it, right? There's the ability to have designing of the sign that says you're in downtown. Is it on all of the streets and all of downtown so you have a coherent sense of the place? Are the buildings kept up? You have an amazing program here that I know has expired, the facade improvement program that the city had that helped people make improvements and look at the new design for taking old buildings' facades back to what they once were when they'd been covered up in the 60s and 70s with weird siding, right? Really helping communities figure out how to look at the design of the buildings, how to help the building owners look at it and make it a high quality. People love being in a place that feels coherent and clean and put together. But we need to pay attention to the details here too, right? We see the sidewalks coming out for where the person is crossing the street. We see the really well-striped crosswalk. And this makes sure that both the people walking as well as the cars know that this is a shared space. Right? This is a space where people will be crossing the street. And because the sidewalks come out from the two sides, it makes the person crossing the street feel more protected and safer about walking around the neighborhood. And it also slows down the traffic, which I know might not be the right idea to some people, but when you are those retail businesses or those production businesses along the street, you actually want those cars to slow down just a little bit more so they can stop and take a look. And as a person walking along the street, we know that that's important for safety reasons. And then fourth is diversify the economy. So this is looking at what are all the different kinds of businesses that are in the area, on the Main Street, in the downtown. How do we get as many different types of businesses there, really curating our community, right? What do we need to attract? What are we missing? What would be great to have? What do I want to have down the street? Can I find one of those businesses and bring them here? and thinking through those kinds of pieces. And again, check the details, right? We have the sidewalks, we have the street trees, a little bare in this picture, honestly. We have the on-street parking, there's the striping for the bikes, and then we have these narrow lanes. We have these thin lanes for the cars, so they can still come through, but we're creating this shared space. So we know that this is both for people walking around, biking around, and then driving through the area all together. So why is it important to look at this detail? And the answer is it really means getting the right outcomes. Looking at the details, both of the businesses and the business types and the way the space is put together, is that combination that makes the biggest difference. So I'm going to give you just a few reasons why. One, that safe access, making people feel safe walking around an area, helps strengthen the local economy. And I'll give you a little bit more about that. We have a great study from Washington State that shows that when the community and the city got together at the beginning for rural communities and thought about what the street and the sidewalk needed to be for a main street at the beginning, and thought through all the things like sidewalks and safe crossings and on-street parking, they actually saved money in the process because they did one thoughtful investment. We also know that these slower speeds save lives. So when cars are going at 20 miles an hour through a neighborhood or through a main street versus 40 miles an hour, the incidence of a car hitting a person, the impact of that on whether or not that there's a fatality or the person lives is an enormous difference, right? At 20 miles an hour on average, 8.5, right? People will live, while at 40 miles an hour, only 1.5. Right? So where we want to have people, we need to be very thoughtful of how we quite purposefully slow down the traffic so that it is a safe place for everybody. And then we also know that the more people can walk for their daily needs, the healthier the community can be. I'll harken back to the gym membership. I used to do a lot of work with the American Public Health Association, and Dr. Benjamin's the head of it, always talked about how it's not access to a gym that's important. It's actually access to passive recreation. It's walking to school. It's getting the chance to walk to get a cup of coffee or walk to see a friend. It's that activity, that passive activity, that's really important for keeping us and our communities healthy. And the more that we're thinking about integrating that into all that we do, the healthier our communities have the opportunity to be. And then there was this great study done, well, honestly, it's by my old organization, Smart Growth America, so I'm a little biased, but they did a great study looking at places that did these kinds of improvements with the sidewalks and the streets and the really protecting the people walking and biking and creating a shared space. And there were a couple cities that kept information from before and after. What was going on with the jobs and the businesses and the property values. And the folks that collected information found that it actually made a difference. It made a difference that these improvements attracted more jobs, more businesses to the area, higher sales in those places, and increased property values. So thinking about all of the details about the businesses in the places and that space in between is very important for the community.